Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles.
Frankly, by the end of the book, you were asking about comments about the Shai Held book. It kind of turned into word salad for me, and I've seen a couple of interviews with him, which were excellent, and at the end of an hour interview or an hour and a half, I think, a talk, I pretty much got it. But I do understand that he was trying to be very, very thorough and making an argument and kept on making it over and over and over again and with hundreds of pages of footnotes. So I understand that. As a casual reader, I might have done better with Cliff Notes.
I'm going to tell you, if you looked at the title of what I sent out to you, the top line is, can God have faith in humankind? Mm-hmm. Right? He ends up by saying God has faith in us. And I'm going to raise a question now about that, that sort of runs through a lot of the comments that I want to make. Not all of them, but, the stuff that I sent you is open to discussion, seriously. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about. Okay, Barbara, yeah, go ahead.
I know I've said it to you, but I thought Bert should hear that I agree with exactly what you just said. I couldn't read the last chapter. It was just too much repetition. And I told Joel the same thing already in shul. So I'm telling you and the others that are on the thing.
Okay. Yeah, no, I understand. And he was trying to sort of wrap it up. And remember, conclusion, reviews, and he says so, as you saw on number 13, number 12. This one, he told you to go back and look and see. So he's pulling everything together. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think the point is, yes, he has talked about similar topics from all kinds of different perspectives. Okay. And I understand that his desire is to be thorough, right? And to leave no stone unturned. And the other point, of course, the other challenge that he faces, and he admits it from time to time, is that there's so much conflicting because of the antiquity of the sources that he's dealing with. Right? He's trying to bring together close to 3,000 years of writing on these points and to make something coherent out of it. So you can say there are certain streams that he points to over and over again. Yes, that's right, and that's repetitive. But the bottom line is, because of changing times and values and situations, that 3,000-year-old corpus of sacred writing and thinking it's difficult to get your arms around. Let's be frank about this, especially when you look at the thing from a more critical perspective. If you want to create an ongoing midrash that has a certain concept, let's say Kabbalah. Okay, so Kabbalah can run over a lot of these rough points through its interpretive process. And you'll, believe it or not, have somewhat of a more coherent perspective, albeit, yes, also needing to deal with inconsistencies. Okay, and the same thing is if you are Rambam, right? So Rambam has got a basic guideline, which he says when reading Bible, it's metaphor. And the rules of accepting that are defined by A, B, C, and D in his mind. So it's controlled midrash. But beyond that, he's basically selling a certain point. One God, no attributes, law, worship, meditation, etc. And those themes will pop up all over the place. But it's the nature of the beast. Look, we've in the United States of America been in existence since 1776, right? The Constitution since, 1789, 91, I forget, because you got the Bill of Rights and but, around that time, right? Okay. And today you interpret it, right? And if you're on the right side of the spectrum, you interpret it one way. If you're on the left side of the spectrum, you interpret it the other way. No, it's just like Judaism, right? And that's only a 250-year-old document? Less. 230-year-old document. We're dealing with 3,000 years. Okay, so that's part of the issue that he's trying to deal with. It's a humongous, achievement in that respect. But I personally find it to be a thought-provoking compendium of a variety of perspectives on the issues that he raises, I think he makes the point clearly that love is a very strong factor in the Jewish tradition. On that point, I think he has succeeded, because he shows throughout time that concept has flowed. Fine. Great job in that regard. It's encyclopedic. So, I now know if I want to try to find some sources on the subject, let's say for a sermon or for a speech, I can go to Held and I'll open up the book and I'll start looking through the footnotes and bingo, take the themes, bada bing, bada boom, put it together, and there I am. I got an hour talk, right? So it's great, and I can say, read this book. Of course, somebody will read it and they'll fall asleep, but that's okay. Anyway.
Without this class, it would have been an impossible book to read, I think. Without this class,
at least we were able to
reading it on a week-by-week basis, I don't think I would have ever gotten past the first or second chapter.
I think I would agree with you. I would use it once I got the feel of the book. I would use it as a source, as a resource, because it's a great topic. And, from an ethical point of view, he really brings in a lot. I told Elliot Dorff about it, and, I told him you should really look at it. And, he could become very critical of the book. He's got the background that I don't have in terms of, learning about teaching ethics, and because that's his whole lifetime. But, all right, anyway, I want to talk. So he begins by talking about, he makes this statement, the first statement on the page, on page 421. Remember, all my numbers are Kindle numbers. All right. But it's here. You've got it. God will not force us to love, right? He implants the capacity to love within us, but doesn't determine whether or not how we exercise the capacity. For God to do so would be self-defeating, since coerced love is not really love at all. More fundamentally, as we've seen, God is invested in our freedom and willingly takes on the risks that granting us agency requires. God wants us to love, but we can and often do choose to hate, to remain indifferent instead. So the basic point here is free choice. Okay, so I want you to read. We're going to now look at two different sources that, based on one verse, that begin to look at it from a rabbinic point of view. You can see here very clearly how Midrash works. All right, so now we're looking at the verse is Genesis chapter 2, verse 7. Vayitzer Adonai Elohim et Hadam, right? God created the human being from the soils. It says here, this is the first reference to the Arabic food called hummus, right? You didn't know that hummus was the material out of which the earth was created. Isn't that what it says?
Where do you see hummus?
Humus.
I don't see it. Oh, because he translated, but I don't see it in the Hebrew.
That's the translation.
Don't you mean hummus like peat moss, Mr. King of the Pun?
I'm looking at the translation you got there.
Well, I'm looking at Adamah, afar mean Adamah. That's from the earth.
Get the hummus. It says hummus there.
Why? Vayafar ba'afar nishma. I don't see hummus.
In the English.
Oh, yeah, in the English, but I'm looking at the Hebrew.
I don't care about the Hebrew right now.
Oh, okay. Well, why does it say hummus when the Hebrew doesn't say hummus?
It's not hummus, it's humus.
Oh, humus.
You know what humus is? Humus is, it's a bad, and I'm going to say it's a bad translation. The word doesn't belong there because humus is dark, moistened earth that has been fertilized by dead animal and plant life.
Oh, okay.
And that is impossible because, as we learn from verses 5 to 7 of chapter 2, and I'll read it to you now, why that is impossible. It says, no shrub of the field was yet on earth, and no grasses of the field yet sprouted, because God had not sent rain upon the earth, and there were no human beings to till the soil. But a flow would well up from beneath the ground and water the whole surface of the earth. God, Adonai, formed the human from not the soil's humus, but from the moistened soil blowing into his nostrils, etc., etc. So by putting hummus. Not only is it confusing for us lovers of Mediterranean food, but the fact is it is a misinterpretation because there was no plant or animal life before Adam.
Where does it say that it's even moist Hadamah? It just says Hadamah. Vayifach is a
No. Excuse me.
Is a verb.
You didn't hear what I said. I was reading.
I did. I heard what you said.
Verse 5.
Moist.
Verse 5 already says that there was verse 6. A flow would well up from beneath the ground and water the whole surface.
Okay. I didn't get that. I'm sorry.
That's what I read. All right.
Okay. I still didn't hear it. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. Got it?
Yes.
Okay. So it says it was already moistened.
Okay.
So, yes, It is the moistened soil. That's all you need to say. Nothing to do with hummus, unless you throw in some pita.
Okay.
All right. Anyway. Okay. All right. So, all right. Let's set that aside for a moment. All right. But here's the thing. Look at the Hebrew. Look at the Hebrew. The first word, vayitzer. You all see it?
Yep.
The line in Hebrew, the very first word. You notice there are two yuds. You see them? Vav, yud, sadi, resh. Got it? Anybody?
Mm-hmm.
All right? Okay. That's grammatically correct because one yud defines the time. All right. With the vav and the first yud, it means it was done. It's past tense. The second yud is from the root word of to form, which is yud, sadi, resh. So grammatically, it is a perfectly correct form. Okay? All right. However, the problem is that later on in the chapter, in verse 19, Vayitzer is written again. With regard to the animals, there's only one yud. Okay? So now the question is, why are there two yuds? Okay. So now, let's look at the Rashi quotes the Breshit Rabbah. No, I'm sorry. If you look at Breshit Rabbah, the interpretations of Genesis 2:7, Breshit Rabbah 14:4, form, Vayitzer, two yods alluding to man's two inclinations, the good inclination and the evil inclination.
Oh, wow.
That is basic rabbinic psychology, right? We are a combo of those two forces within us, and it's a constant struggle. And that's why you see a Bible that is filled, and even the post-biblical literature, that is filled with all kinds of amazing, good, beautiful things that we can do and accomplish, and so many horrific things that we can accomplish. Okay, we believe in original sin, right? We never have and we never will. But we do, I mean, and in a certain aspect, this is prescient, right? Because today we know that our consciousness is comprised of different tendencies, regardless. I mean, depending upon which school of psychology or psychiatry you come from, you will define it in different ways. But human beings have within them a struggle of tendencies, right? On the one hand, there are tendencies that promote self-preservation, which all animals have, right?
Yeah, right.
On the other hand, there are tendencies that promote relationship and social contact, because Aristotle was right. We are social creatures. We do better in groups that cooperate with one another, right? And it goes back to the cavemen, right? They had groups. They worked together. So we are pulled, our personal needs versus our group needs, right there, okay? And even within ourselves, right? We struggle psychologically in situations. Yeah? I mean, we have some therapists in our group even as we speak. But, but some, you got it. All right, so the rabbis sort of grasped that. The rabbis would argue, well, if that's the case, then what do we do? So, and they would basically say that there's a wonderful midrash that says without, it says, without the Yetzer Hara, without the inclination toward evil, people wouldn't procreate, we wouldn't have sex, you wouldn't have a job, you wouldn't build a home. In other words, all of these things that deal with the preservation of the family and the individual wouldn't exist. That's a result of these impulses. So the question is then, how do you keep the impulses under control so that the inclination toward evil doesn't take over them? What's the rabbi's answer? You read it throughout the whole book. Torah.
Mm-hmm.
If you study Torah and believe it and employ it and run it your life that way, what do? You strengthen the impulse toward the good, the Yetzer HaTov, and you weaken the impulse for evil, the Yetzer Hara. That's what they believed. And therefore, that's our job. And when we get in trouble, it's because we have not applied Torah enough to our lives. This is what the Bible tells us over and over and over again, of course. But they say it's true. It's our psychology, guys. This is what we got to do. That's what they would be saying. All right, so that's their interpretation. But they use those two yuds, the Midrash uses the two yuds to say one goes in this direction, one goes in that direction. Brilliant, but it's Midrash. All right, so that's one interpretation, okay? All right, the second interpretation. Now I will take comments, and then I'm going to do the second. So let's be brief on this. Okay, Bert, and then Tybal.
Quick question. Evil has such a incredibly negative sense in English. Is that the only possible translation of Yetzer Hara? I know Ra.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's an inclination toward doing bad things.
Okay.
The dark side. Remember, we go back to Isaiah 45:7.
Mm-hmm.
It says, I am God, Yotzer Or Vorei Choshech. Light and darkness, Oseh Shalom Vorei Ra.
Mm-hmm.
Harmony and Ra, evil, chaos, the opposite of harmony. Right? Define Shalom. Ra is the opposite of it. Okay? All right. So God, in other words, it's part of how the universe operates. It's the chaotic element in the universe. Science has shown that chaos exists. Chaos theory. Finally, science caught up with second Isaiah. Took 2,500 years to do that. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Tybal.
But it seems to me, in addition to the general answer of Torah and studying, there was also prescribed behavior, because my joke has always been that, or often been that, did we just lose the rabbi?
What?
Oh, no, sorry, I didn't see where you went. That any system where you have to keep counting 100 blessings a day, and you got to do this, and you got to do that, and you got to make sure you do this, that it's a way to manage excess testosterone into moving what might have been a competitive impulse into different channels.
Yeah, well, that's exactly the point.
Yeah, but Torah to me is the studying of the book.
No. Torah is intended to be applied. Torah is not to remain. The Torah itself says so. Read Torah. It's not, the ideal is not a yeshiva student who sits and studies all day. That is a misunderstanding of Torah. Torah is learn it and then live by it. Okay? Study, yes. Assign time for study, yes. But that's the only thing you do? No. Cut and dry. No argument. Rambam even says that in the Mishnah Torah. This is a guy meditation, right? All right, he says you should divide your day up. Study Torah, study philosophy, and work. He refused to get payment as a rabbi because he was a doctor. He got paid for being a doctor because you can't be paid for studying Torah, according to him. He was a man of his word. Remember, this is a guy who was a full-time doctor and did his rabbinic stuff at night. We know that from a letter he wrote. All right, that's the ideal. Study, yes. Pray, yes. Get into your spiritual side. So when you apply it in your work side, in your worldly side, you can live according to the principles. That's the ideal. And that's what the rabbis mean. The Torah will take your inclination toward evil and take that potential energy, as you said yourself, Tybal, and refocus it into action. That's the whole idea, proper action. All right, I want to get to the second thing, but I see so many hands. I'll move ahead. Okay, so first, Barbara, and then
yeah, this is a brief thing. Yetzer and Yitzer both are Yud Sadi Resh.
Yeah.
Yetzer, Vayitzer.
Yeah.
So what makes one a Yud with a
it's an inconsistency in the text here, unfortunately. The second one should have had a second Yud.
No. But
you're talking rules of grammar.
Yeah. Where does the Yetzer and the Yitzer? The Yetzer is
Yetzer is a noun. Yatzar.
Oh, it's a noun. That's the difference. Thank you. That's all.
All right.
That's all.
Marion. Good. Marion.
So it's just actually a quick question, but I think you sort of answered it. There's a different pronunciation, right? And of course we know the Torah is deliberate. So what are the two pronunciations? Forgive me, I don't know the Hebrew well.
So Yetzer is a noun.
So the Yetzer hara, right,
yes,
is a noun.
Har means an inclination.
Okay, right. Okay, right. That's a hara.
Understanding is it is something. It is a force with an inclination that was created.
Now, is that the two yuds or the one yud?
They're both. Yatzar is one yud. Yetzer is one yud.
Oh, so then what? Okay,
you're dealing with a grammatical structure here, which is a complex one.
Okay,
it requires two yuds.
So.
That's
I thought you said it was the same word, but one has two. Oh, because of where it is in the sentence.
Form.
Because of the way it is. Okay.
Undeclined, unconjugate. Your conjugated
got
verb.
It. Okay, I got it. It has to do. So my question is there a different pronunciation for the two?
Yes. Yetzer is the noun. Yatzar is the basic verb.
And which one has the one yud and which has the two yuds?
Both do. Yud Sadi Resh.
I guess I'm confused.
I think
so what the word that you have down here with the two yuds, is that pronounced the Yetzer?
No, Vayitzar.
Vayitzar. So is that the same pronunciation as with one yud? That's what I'm asking. Is there a different pronunciation for one yud and two yuds?
Well, no.
It has to do, Joel, can I say it's the difference vowel is the whole thing in the Yetzer.
Well, you've added a vowel.
Stop.
Okay.
Look in the note on your page.
Right.
Look at the Rashi comment.
Right.
And there it's written Vav Yud Sadi Resh.
And how do you pronounce that?
That would the same as with the two yuds.
Okay, that's what I'm
verbal form.
That's what I'm asking. It's the same pronunciation.
By Yitzer or by Yatzar.
Okay.
I didn't look at. There's no vowels there. I didn't check them up. But that is the verbal form, so it's not Yetzer by itself is the noun form, and that's Ye 2 dots, Tzer 3 dots.
Okay, so I know a little Hebrew, I don't know, but what I'm saying then is it's the two different forms are in the Torah.
Yes,
and that is
a verb,
something to examine, but it's a different tense,
right?
or a different grammatical piece. Okay,
picked up on the inconsistency.
But then the rabbis go and to say, make a whole Megillah out of it and say what is about it. Okay, I get it.
But they're nothing new. Today we do the same thing.
I
We make a big deal about it too, but we're using rules of grammar to try to figure out the meaning of the word based upon grammatical rules. The problem being when you get to ancient sources sometimes.
Right, there are no vowels.
Well, no. That's true. Initially,
so we made up the vowels.
That's not what I was going to say. What I was going to say was that in ancient times, all the rules of grammar were not worked out consistently. That process developed even when you get into the rabbinic period, where they began to figure out slowly how these words developed and how they meant. Then they realized that they had past, present, and future forms, then they had to start to deal with that. Okay. And in antiquity, they knew these things, but you get different sources from different times, different places, and they're all thrown together. It becomes sort of confusing. That's all. But it can be worked out. And I do not spend my time analyzing grammatical forms. I look at the results of what other people have done, so I'm not going to get into it anymore. Now, the second one, though, that we just talked about, goes in a different direction. It picks up on the same question. Rashi is here citing from Midrash Tanhuma. Okay, if you go to the end of that Rashi selection, you see it? Vayitzer, and God formed. You got it? Okay. Go to the bottom of that in parentheses at Midrash Tanhuma Tazria 1. All right, that's a midrashic source that Rashi is using for this interpretation. Here's what he says. God formed. The letter Yod is written twice to intimate that there were two formations of the human being, two creations of the human being. A formation of man for this world, and a formation of man for resurrection, which hasn't happened yet. In the case of animals, however, which will not stand after death for judgment before God, the word referring to their formation, vayitzer, is not written with two yuds. So animals are created, they die, and that's the end of it. Humans are created, and when they die, their soul ascends to the court up on high, and the soul is judged based upon how well they lived their life, which means how ethical, how close to the law and their values of the law did they live. If they lived a very devoted life, it is very possible that they get a clean slate and they just go into the waiting room in heaven for the resurrection to happen when the Mashiach comes. If they need a slap on the hand, so maybe they'll get some form of punishment from the divine court. Don't ask me what they're going to give them, in order to learn their lessons. And so after a month, they go into a waiting room until the Mashiach comes. All right, if they're really lousy people, they could get up to 12 months punishment. And then they go, they go into the waiting room. All right. If they're really, 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 really bads, Adolf Hitler type bad, Stalin type bad, okay, what happens is their soul is destroyed. Psst, goodbye. And their body remains in Sheol, in the ground, to decompose and rot and create humus. Okay? That's it. Now, what happens when the Mashiach comes? All of these cleansed souls in the infinite waiting room in heaven are reunited with their bodies, and now they go into a second form of the body, which will be defined by God at the time, and there will be a recreation of the physical, of the bonded physical spiritual creature, presumably with an orientation which the prophets talk about, which means a much more clearly pre-programmed good person. Now, the question, of course, that arises, does that mean they don't have free choice anymore? Because the bottom line in all of this discussion is that ultimately, at our stage of human existence, we have free will, right? And we can use that free will any way we choose, but according to the rabbis, at a certain point after we die, we will be judged according to how we chose to live. Remember the court, the waiting room, etc.? I'm giving you a ballpark definition of how the process works. Believe me, you're not going to find a single page where this is laid out. But if you pull from here, pull from there, and you have people talking in general senses, this is more or less what's discussed in the millennia of discussion. All right, so you understand then. So we were created as we are, first creation, right? That's one yud. The second yud points to when we going through court, and if necessary, go to jail for a while, and we're cleansed, blah, blah, blah. Then there's a whole new creation waiting for us that already is designed, and that second creation, which is the second Yud, will take place. Okay? Got it. Got it? Whereas with animals, no, nothing like that. When they die. End of discussion. No judgment, and they're not resurrected. Okay? Don't lose any sleep over this. Okay. Marion.
So I won't lose sleep, but I don't believe that.
That's okay. I'm not saying
okay.
you have to believe
Oh,
it.
no. I just wondered, because when I say I don't believe it, I don't know that they go before heavenly court, but I definitely believe that their souls are whatever.
Whatever. You know what? And
but it's like, I don't know about a heavenly court. That's a whole other story.
But you see, there is the whole idea behind here is by the year 0, even before that, the Pharisees already had the concept of a world to come as an ideological principle in 150 BCE. We know about that. Josephus writes about that. Okay? That's when that became crystallized. There's some hints in the Bible.
My dead cat's not going to come back
Forget about the dead cat. Right. Okay. We're talking about humans here. Okay.
I know. Okay.
But the point is, they looked at the world around them and they said, there are a bunch of these. It's the old question, Sadiq Varalo Rasha Vatov. The righteous guy the righteous guy's got a miserable life, and the evil guy lives, in a 15,000 square foot house in Bel Air. How do you justify that? Okay, answer. That means there needs to be another realm of existence in which a just God will create a system of judgment. And that punishment will be such that no matter what they would have gotten on earth short of capital punishment, it would be very, very challenging. But it's limited, as I said. Okay. Anyway, that's the point. So that was their way of resolving the question. I guarantee you, half the Jewish world today probably walks around believing that is indeed the case. The other half has questions or simply says, I don't know. Okay. You can believe in the continuity of the soul, right? But you can say, I don't know about this judgment thing. And you can say, I don't know if there's going to be a Mashiach. Do I really want a Mashiach? Do I want a king to rule over me? Personally, Rambam speaking, I love a democracy. I don't want a system where a single person determines the ultimate fate of millions and millions of lives. That is not how I want to live, because ultimately it fails and leads to horrible destruction. Okay, so I will never support anything that smacks of that. All right, but that's my perspective. There are people who will say, don't worry, the Mashiach's coming, take care of everything. It's going to happen right away. So it doesn't really matter. When Mashiach comes, the Jewish people will be ruled by King David, and they will live in ultimate peace. Not David, but somebody from the line of King David, and they'll have 70 rabbis in the court making decisions. None of them conservative or reform, of course, and et cetera, et cetera. Okay, all right. Bert, now I want to move on.
I just recall when I was living in New York many years ago, you could get a beeper that were being sold, and when the Mashiach came, the beeper would go off. Whoever was watching for the Mashiach, which is not, it's nice. That somehow I would think you would know other than needing a beeper. But I think while a lot of people don't believe what you're talking about, an afterlife, a world to come, many people, even many non-religious people, will talk about karma or what goes around comes around, and without really knowing how or what, some kind of a sense that in the end, evil people are going to get it. Yeah. Somehow, some way, somewhere.
Look, it's a common, it is common to, I would say, all human beings in one way or another. Any sensitive human being has to realize that there's misery in this world that doesn't seem to be justified, and that there are people causing that, and they deserve to somehow be punished or, locked up somewhere so they can't do any harm, whatever, okay? And then we can discuss.
Unless the system's rigged.
What?
Unless the system is rigged.
But then that's right. If the system is rigged, then it's not the system. The system is supposed to operate in a way that generates justice, right? And preserves human freedom, so we can express our free will, hopefully under the influence of the inclination toward good. That's the ideal for a Jew.
But you're not supposed to do it to get a reward.
No, but it doesn't matter. You're supposed to do it, and you will eventually get the reward, right. But that should not be your main reason, right? Because you're living in the here and now, and you got to make sure that the here and now works, does the best job, and not a fouled up job. That's the point. All right, now, okay, enough of that. Now, then he goes on to talk about the fact that God, remember, God, you read the Bible, if you read the creation stories, there's a pattern that he sees about good things and bad things with respect to people. And he comes up with a conclusion. So let's look at these verses that you have here, okay? So first you got Genesis 1:27, okay? You just got the Hebrew here. And God created humankind in the divine image, creating it in the image of God, creating them male and female. Okay. So you could say from this you can learn, right, that this was this act of loving grace that God bestowed upon the human being, that the rabbis make a significant deal about, that God chose to even tell us that we were created in the divine image, right? So that's a blessing for us, right? But it implies certain things. It's an act of love. Along with it, though, it comes honor and power, but also responsibility. All right. So it's a gift of grace to the human, right? That we are in the image of God. Being in the image of God implies operating in a certain way. Okay. But it's interesting. Male and female implies what? That's another potential for love. A man and a woman, or two people of the same gender, can get together and fall in love and have a family, right? And share that love with their children. So now you got two generations of love. And the love can develop, if they raise their kids properly, among the siblings. I mean, in the end, most siblings, I think, love each other. It can be a hard way to get there. I know that. I don't know that personally. I'm an only child. But I mean, I have 8 grandchildren, so I can tell you a lot. All right, anyway, basically, our grandkids love each other. All right? In the totality, which is a good thing. All right, good parents. They have good parents. Grandparents, I don't know. All right, anyhow. All right? So, but love can be transmitted that way. It's a good thing. Great. Sounds wonderful. Now, verse Genesis 3:6. Having had this wonderful creation, etc., when the woman saw that the tree was good for eating and delight to the eyes, and the tree was desirable source of wisdom, she took its fruit and ate, and then she gave it to her husband, and he ate. What was the law that God gave them? Don't eat from that tree. So right away, they are breaking the law. These goddamn humans, what did I do? Okay, but then it gets even better, right? Cain said to his brother Abel, come, let us go out to the field, whether it's in or not, depending upon what you're reading. And when they were out in the field, Cain set upon his brother Abel, and he killed him. Is this a good thing? Are these people good creatures? Did I do the right thing? All right, so now it was good potential, bad outcome. Genesis 5:1. This is the record of Adam's line when God created humankind. It was made in the likeness of God. Oh, suddenly this is good now. We're reminded that we're in the likeness of God, so maybe it was a pretty good thing that humans were created. All right, so okay, we learned our lesson. From this point on, everything is going to be wonderful. Genesis 6:7. Hashem said, I will blot out from the earth humankind whom I created, humans together with beasts, creeping things, and the birds of the sky, for I regret that I made them. And then after the flood, even God says, he says, never again will I doom the earth because of humankind, destroy every living being as I have done. Right? Because the devisings of the human mind are evil from youth. Okay, so I'm not going to do it to the other creatures. But what is missing here? Does he say what he's going to do to the human being? What does it say? He's not going to punish the other creatures or the whole world because of the bad things we do. But what's still open?
What about the good things?
Can he get rid of us and start over again with the cockroaches? The cockroaches are supposed to be able to survive an atomic war. All right. So it says, he doesn't say that he's not going to kill us. You read it closely. It's, so the question is, does that line evince faith in humankind? 8:21, after the flood, when he promises he's not going to bring another flood. Right? Does it show you his faith in humankind? No. But then again, now go to 9:6. Now this is a real zinger, okay? Whoever sheds human blood by human hands shall the one's blood be shed. For in the image of God humankind made. All right, great. We're in God's image again. But whoa, ho, ho, ho. What are humans still doing?
Bad things.
Bad things. So he's telling us.
Killing each other.
Yeah, we're killing each other. That's bad, but it's okay. You got to kill the killers because you killed something that was made in God's image, so you shouldn't kill them in the first place. But then you're getting rid of the killer by killing him. Well, was the killer made in God's image or not? Well, if he's a human being, presumably he was. He just went a little cuckoo. It's not a very strong statement of faith in humankind. So I am basically saying the Bible in these initial stages of talking about people, it's not so clear. And what happened right after the flood?
Right there to say Noah, all of a sudden he gets drunk, and he was supposed to be the righteous guy.
Yeah, right, exactly. But what happened after that? You ever hear of the Tower of Babel?
Yeah, Babel.
Right, Babel. That came after the flood. God wanted them to spread out over the earth so they could do the job that they were supposed to do, which is run the world in a meaningful, godly way. Right?
And God also said, let's have 70 languages or whatever. I mean, so
no. That was the punishment.
Okay.
That was the whole point. You said that this is a way the Bible explains why are there so many different peoples and so many different languages, because God wanted that should have been the way it should have been. But God had to babble up their languages so they couldn't talk to each other, so that would happen. And then they split up and went away because they were saying, we're going to build this tower as a sign that we are powerful. It doesn't mean they were storming heaven to take over. No, those are probably a ziggurat concept from the Babylonian cities, which is the way that the city defined that we are great. We are powerful. And that's what they said. We're going to stay together because we love being together. And they all spoke one language, but boy, we are going to be powerful. We're going to show God that we are powerful by building this tower. All right? And God said, oh, no, you're not. So he mixed up their languages, and then they ended up spreading all around the world, which is what God wanted to do in the first place. That's what he said after the flood. Be fruitful, multiply, spread out, and do your job. Okay, so I don't think God has that much faith in humanity out of these stories. Okay? That's my response to the author of the book. Because he says, right, whether or not we become God's likes left in our own hands, all right, that's true. No, I'm sorry. That's the next line. Next one. All right, here. Not just God has faith in us, it's that God takes mercy on us too. But God has decided to remain faithful to us, come what may. Well, these statements, I don't think, validate that statement. Okay, Bert.
I was just going to say God must have been phenomenally disappointed.
Yes.
Really, really, really heavy. I mean, we're talking anthropomorphically, but I mean, here he, she went and said, I regret even making man in the first place. I regret making humans. I'm going to wipe everybody. I'm going to start again. He starts again, and he ends up with a mess.
Right.
And if God is all powerful, then God's disappointment must be cosmically huge.
Right. Yes, I agree. And I think ultimately that's why he chose Abraham and his descendants. But then I hate to say this, don't tell this to the anti-Semites among us. Nobody here is an anti-Semite, I hope. But I mean, the point is, what does the Bible say about how we as a people function?
Not good.
No.
Not good.
We end up in exile. And some of us come back, and the temple is rebuilt, and people said it's not as good as the first one, right? But what happens with the second generation of the returnees, with the priests whose kids married out of the fold? They married these crypto-pagans, the Jews who had been there from before, who intermarried, married their women. And Nehemiah says, get them out. Get them out, because they're going to corrupt our monotheism and we're going to go back into exile. You want to go back into exile? Get rid of them. So they got rid of them. And then everybody's happily ever after. And then the Bible ends. Okay. And then, of course, you have the Maccabees, who started off as great heroes and ended up as being, they're like everybody else, a corrupt kingship, priesthood even, playing games with the Greeks. Okay. And then, of course, you have the second destruction of Jerusalem, was it destroyed? Because about hatred among the Jews themselves. So, I mean, our record in this whole discussion is not too good. Now, if you want to say here, God stuck to it, yeah, because God got himself into a pickle, which was not the case initially. All these discussions we read in Genesis, there are always loopholes that God can use to get out of his promises not to destroy. There was one, however, that he made with Abraham, and he perpetuated with Isaac and Jacob, and then with the whole people at Mount Sinai, which was what? I have a covenant to you. I will never abandon you. You are my child, you. I might punish you severely, you, but I'm never going to walk away from you. So according to the Torah, God locked himself, because God is a just and a loyal and faithful God. God will not break his promise. God will not break his promise. And God did not break the promise about the flood, right? He never destroyed the world with a flood again. Okay, and if it happens now, it won't be God's fault. Okay, God was good for that. So God is good on promises, even though he puts himself sometimes into a corner, which is where he has been, up through the Bible with the Jewish people, even into the Second Temple and post-Second Temple period. The Bar Kokhba revolt that happened in 132 CE was more destructive of the community in Eretz Yisrael than was the revolt against Rome in 66 to 70. Far more destructive. Okay. Marion.
So
Happy times. Yeah, go ahead.
There's a lot going on here, but one thing, this whole thing, of course, is telling us that, in my view, that we do need to look at the Yetzer Tov and the Yetzer Hara, because it is the Yetzer Hara is basically the majority, and it's basically everywhere. And that's the thing. So all of this, when a Christian looks at this, they see this as all this horror that happened and all this whatever, but we look at it as lessons learned. And if a Christian who believes in this, that Christ, died for their sins and all this, and then there's the saint stuff, it's like they don't see themselves. They don't know what a human being is. They don't know what that is. And we know what human beings are and what they're capable of, because we've seen it through the whole Torah, and we know what it is. And we identify with that in ourselves. I do identify with that in myself as things that are, I am totally capable of doing all of those things.
Yeah.
And that's where I get confused about Christianity. That's where I get in debate with people who are Christian in terms of that. It's like, there is no space for being a human being.
Well, I think you made a good point in the following regard. Our sacred texts, both biblical and rabbinic, wash our dirty laundry in public. And they are, the entire Jewish people, one way or another, respects those sources and carry with them the traditions and the learning and everything you've said, the lessons. And it's our job to try to learn from the lessons and act appropriately. And we may be irresponsible at different points in time. I think, well, I won't get into that situation right now, but we can be irresponsible and not deal with that, right? And then eventually there are ramifications to it. The problem, I think, with Christianity in general is their sacred sources are from antiquity, and they don't factor in as much the last 2,000 years of history. Jews tried to remind them over and over again of what they had done to the world, right? So when Jews were debating with Christians in the Middle Ages, the Christians would say, look, you were such a bad people that God took your covenant away and gave it to us. So a learned Jew who learned it in the Bible, in their Christian Bible, will say, no. Paul himself in Romans chapter 10 says very clearly, God's promise is still active. God doesn't break promises. Read your Bible. Our covenant still exists. You cannot supplant us. And that's an argument that should be made. That's number one. But number two, we reminded them, so you are a peace-loving people, you love all these things. How many people have you killed over the past centuries in the name of the Lord Jesus, who was the God of love? You mean to tell me that you've dealt with the Jewish people out of love? You dealt with the Muslims out of love? You dealt with all the pagans in Europe you killed in order to get pagan into Christianity? You dealt with the wars between the religious-based wars between Britain and Spain. How many thousands of people died in that? The war between the Protestants and the Catholics, the various wars based on that. Wars of the Byzantine Catholic Christians with the Roman Christians. The Jews would be saying this all along, in one ear and out the other. They didn't factor that into what their tradition had generated. Okay. And the same thing, when Christian missionaries went into Africa, what did they do? What was their goal? To change the Africans into Christians, right? That's why the missionaries went there. Sometimes they succeeded, in many places they failed, but they didn't cause a lot of love.
Not to mention what we did to the natives.
Yes.
Native Americans and Native Canadians.
Here too, exactly.
Not even to mention that.
Right, exactly. Yes. Well, that may have been just a land grab. I don't know if that was so ideological. Maybe it was. I don't know.
Oh no! All this, the whole thing that's coming out with all of the finding the bodies in those mass graves and in.
No. I'm not denying that there was genocide in many cases. I'm not denying that.
No, but what I'm saying is that was all done in the name of Christianity, trying to convert.
In some instances,
natives. Yeah. Some instances, like did.
Oh, I don't know the.
You got to see the latest movie. Oh my God.
I saw some of them. Yes, I understand. Yes, I know. Right. Yeah, I understand. Okay, Jackie.
I just wanted to say, and I was thinking about it also, is what I find with Christianity is that they lump all sins together. And the rabbis, and I give them so much credit, they went into the small versus the big. For example, I'm always hearing when I turn on a Christian station, I just like to hear what they're saying sometimes, about the Pharisees and the money changers. And I was thinking, okay, and we don't even know what that was about. For all we know, the money was to make the temple look grander, that people would come and be drawn to it, or it could be to give to the poor. We don't know. But you talk about the annihilation over and over that the Christians and the pagans to the Jewish people. And then I think of the Jews' contribution to the world, saving millions by the polio vaccine. The Jewish doctor, Jonas Salk, who did that, who was raised an Orthodox Jew. To me, the most important gift we give to the world is from the Torah, that we, the people of Judaism, have given so many gifts to the world to save people, to extend life, to make life more beautiful in every field. And I think when the Christians did that, like the arts, for example, let's say the arts, I think they got that from Judaism. I mean, that whole idea of making the world a better place, to me, came from Judaism. When I look back and see how the world developed.
Yeah, of course. I mean, look, a lot of people don't realize I'm not here to dump on Christianity, okay? Because some of my best friends are Catholics. No, I mean, the truth is, I give a lot of kavod to John the 23rd and what happened after him in terms of changing the tone of Catholicism, okay? And there are a lot of Protestant denominations, their perspective on Israel notwithstanding. But I mean, there's a lot within some of the other modern Protestant denominations that are very open to all the other faiths and to a broader perspective on humankind. But evangelicals pose a big problem. But again, even there are different colorations of evangelicals, and there are some who love Israel, not because in some reason they have a deep love for Israel per se, but because they see that as part of their messianic concept. Okay, it's to their benefit. There are others who actually have great respect for a Jew's commitment to Judaism, and honestly do, and they're not so hep upon converting us. So, I mean, there are all kinds of movements within Christianity that we have to realize. The problem is, though, one of the problems when you go back to the earliest sources, like the Bible, okay, even the Christian Bible, right? When Jesus condemns the money changers, they're not charging interest. Why are there were money changers in the temple area? There were, absolutely. Why? In order to aggrandize the temple? No. They were changing money so they could go down below the Temple Mount, and we know exactly where this happened, and buy sheep that they could take back up and offer as sacrifices to God. That's why, because you can't buy a sheep in Israel with an Alexandrian coin. You had to use an Eretz Yisrael coin, which were minted, in order to buy the sheep. And you're not going to come from Alexandria with your sheep all the way to Israel to go up the mountain and go to the temple. Your sheep is going to die, right? So, I mean, that's what it was all about. It was so that they could participate in the sacrificial offerings in the temple, plain and simple. That had nothing to do with greed, okay? And they take, because they don't understand the Jewish framework out of which Jesus was talking, they assume, for example, that when Jesus says, Sabbath was made for the man, not man for the Sabbath, okay, well, he was right. No question about it, but that doesn't mean that his men could go and harvest on the Sabbath. What they should have done was gone and harvested on Friday. So he was one of, if you will, you should pardon me, one of the first Reformed Jews. He says it's okay if you harvest on Saturday because you're hungry, you got to eat. All right, nobody can deny that they should eat. But the traditional way of dealing with that, and you get that already from the story in the Bible about the manna, right? There's your paradigm. What did God say on Friday? What are you supposed to do? Take 2 portions of manna because it ain't going to be there on Saturday. And it won't rot like it will during the week. It'll you don't have to put it in the refrigerator either. Take your manna 2 portions on Friday. 1 will be for Saturday. That's what Jesus should have told his people to do. But for some reason, he neglected to do it. All right, but the Christians don't have a sense of what that's all about. There are a number of statements in the Gospels where they could have come out of Jesus' mouth or not. If they did, he was not such an expert in certain elements of how the technical things of the system operated. I mean, the guy was not. He was. He tried. I will tell people, and I've done this publicly, There are a variety of things for which Jesus stood that I stand for also. I agree with him 100% because he speaks as a Jew. And as part of, he absorbed basic principles of Judaism. Absolutely. No question. But there are other statements that he makes that are inappropriate or based on ignorance or simply the way the gospel writers interpreted the words of Jesus. Remember, Jesus lived around the year 30 of the Common Era. Maybe he died in I think he died 32, something like that. Nobody knows for sure. But he lived in 30 CE, right? You know when the first books of the New Testament were written?
Hundreds of years later, much later.
No, not hundreds. No.
No?
After the destruction of the temple, sometime between 70 and 100. And they were diddled with for a few, decades after that. By the year 150 or so, they were probably pretty much in place, especially the book of John, which is the last one, which was only begun around the year 100. All right, so I mean, so the point is, Jesus' words within their own sacred book are not necessarily his words. Now, if you're a modern Christian who understands the critical theories of that, they will agree with you, sure. There's interpretation of Jesus in the book, the same way that there's interpretation of the Word of God in the Hebrew Bible. There is midrash on an earlier tradition in the Hebrew Bible. One book, especially even within the Torah. Okay, Exodus says God will take the nations out of Canaan so that the Israelites can take over the land. That's Exodus. Deuteronomy says kill them and take over the land. Okay, Deuteronomy was written after Exodus, and the zeal of Deuteronomy's monotheism is greater than in Exodus. Not to say that Exodus was in favor of polytheism. All right, but the fact is, so there's midrash in the Torah itself, and it's the same thing within the Gospels. Later traditions are interpreting the original words of Jesus to suit their ideology. Now, and if you accept that, you understand all of this, it changes your whole perspective on it. And there are a lot of Christians, modern thinking Christians, who will say to you, yes, Jesus was a Jew, and there are elements we agree. There's a whole thing called, I don't know if it's still operating, but over decades, the Jesus Project that was called, which involved Jews and Christians getting together, experts in the cultures and wording, the language, the culture, the faith of the time when Jesus lived, trying to ferret out what Jesus could have said versus what other people would have put into his mouth. And you can read the studies, and it's perfectly clear. Most of the things that Jesus says was his slant on the Judaism of his time, which was a multiple slanted tradition. Remember, 30 CE, there were Pharisees, there were Sadducees, there were Essenes of a variety of people, some of whom were on the Dead Sea already. Okay? So was there a monolithic Judaism at that time? No. And were the Pharisees and the Sadducees at each other's throats? Not really. But I mean, did they all? No, there's huge disagreement between the Pharisees and the Sadducees on basic theology. A difference today between Catholicism and Lutheranism share much more between the two of them, and the same thing, Catholicism and the Church of England share much more than the Pharisees and the Sadducees did. I mean, even Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai disagreed on all kinds of things within the Pharisees. It says so. But they say they would sit together at each other's tables and eat. Nothing like this glot meat stuff that we have to live with today, right? They would marry each other's children, right? They would respect each other. And the fact is the Mishnah went out of the way to cite positions that were Shammite traditions. Okay? It's there. So, I mean, it was a soft differential compared to the other stuff. My point is, Jesus lived in a period of multiple expressions of Judaism. And then you had the Zealots, who for political and extreme messianic reasons were causing the big trouble that led to the revolt in 66. I mean, so you tell me what's authentic Judaism in the first century of the Common Era. Got the point? Okay. That's the framework in which Jesus was talking. He was just another voice. Okay? All right, Barbara.
A difference between Jews and Christians. Rabbi Elliot Dorff mentioned he was on a panel with Christian rabbis, and he was the rabbi and a couple of priests, and all the Jews would question everything that was said by both the priests and Elliot Dorff, and none of the Christians questioned anything that the priest or Rabbi Dorff said. And at the end, when everybody left, the priest said to Elliot Dorff, "It's very unusual. No, everybody's questioning you. Doesn't that bother you?" And Elliot said, "No, that's being a Jew, to question everything we say or do, and not believe that I am necessarily right or any other rabbi is necessarily right."
Right.
It's always impressed me.
Yeah.
And then the other thing was that Jesus actually didn't ever convert to Christianity. It was his followers that set up the religion. Jesus died a Jew.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Right, no question. And many of his followers considered themselves Messianic Jews. I mean, the group of Christians, if you read the Christian Bible, the whole concept of kashrut was thrown out by Peter and Paul. There's a big discussion among the early church people whether or not you needed to be circumcised to become a believer, to become a member of their group. And there was a whole element that said, yes, we're Jews. And everyone says, well, we don't have to because Jesus is, there's a whole new connection through Jesus. Speaking as Jews. So within their own group, there were disagreements as to what to follow in the first and second generations. And in fact, when you even get down to the beginning of the second century, there are still remnants of these Jewish Christian groups. You can call them the original Jews for Jesus, but these were authentically Jews. Just they believed that Jesus was the Messiah. Whether or not they believed he was the Son of God, died for their sins, that's something else. I don't know that we know enough about. But clearly they believed, and the Messiah is not supposed to die for our sins. That's not Judaism. And today the Bible scholars who read the Christian Bible will say, if you have Jesus implying that he is the Son of God, or that he will die for their sins, that is not the word. Jesus would never say those things. Okay? Remember in the Torah it says to the Jewish people, you are the children of God. So when I talk to a church group about all this stuff, I will say, you want to know who's the Son of God? I am. I would say, I'm the Son of God. I'm a Jew. God said so. Deuteronomy chapter 4.
Mm-hmm.
I believe in that. I live by that. Do you? I do it very, gently. I don't say it like that. That would be not nice. But I say, Jesus, yes, he is a son of God. And I will say, and every Jew with him is a child of God. That was the belief of Jews at that time. All right. And they'll go, oh, really? Yeah. Oh, I didn't know that. Okay. Now you do. All right. Oy, Bert.
I was just going to say, if humans were created with Tzel Elohim, then really it's not just Jews that are children of God. Jews, as it says in Deuteronomy, I'm talking about individuals, not the Jewish people, but there's nothing there that says that other human beings are not.
Well, there's a difference between a child of God and in the image of God. That's clear in the Torah, right?
And what would that distinction be?
Well, no, the point is it's an adoption, okay? It's not a genetic thing. It's an adoptive process. We are the adoptive children of God. In a sense, all of humankind is through the covenant of Noah.
Okay, well, that's what I'm saying. I mean,
right, that's the rabbinic tradition, yes.
Yeah.
But within the Bible, that does not exist. Okay? All right? And so God makes promises to humankind, yes, but he does not say that they are the children of God. That is never used as far as I can find in the Hebrew Bible. And that's a rabbinic concept. And even there, they didn't use that term, right? I mean, they don't circumcise. We do. The Muslims do. Okay. And the Rambam says that Islam is the closest thing to Judaism. Interesting. With all its errors, they caused it. Because Christianity has a problem of the Trinity. Islam is pure monotheism, and he had to agree with that. But he says you can't teach the Bible to them. We talked about this to Christians, to Muslims. He says you can talk about the Bible with Christians because they respect it. You can't talk about it with the Muslims because they don't respect it, because they believe that Muhammad had the correct version, not the Bible. That's Quran, okay? But other than that, they are higher up on the monotheistic level. All right, title.
I just wanted to know, because it went by too fast, where in Deuteronomy do you cite when you say...
Torah, chapter 7, I forget the exact verses.
I'm sorry, I lost it again. Are you saying 4 or
14? Chapter 14, he quotes
14.
It. Yeah.
If you're talking about children of God, that's in this week's Torah portion, I think. In Raya.
Yeah. No, it's a few times, yeah. But he quotes, we had it already, we talked about it. Deuteronomy 14:3 or something like that. I forgot the verse, but 14:13, I forgot the exact.
I think it's 1. I just looked.
14:1, okay. Yeah. But there's a couple of other places. Okay, now, this I love this next thing though on page 2 of the notes. Okay, this he quotes Rabbi Reuben Hoshke HaKohen, died 1673. All right, so he says Genesis 1 tells us that as God about was created Adam, God declared, "Let us make the human being in our image, after our likeness." The words for image and tselem and likeness are usually taken as synonyms. But one commentator, Rabbi Reuven, reads the verse differently. God creates human beings in God's image, he writes. But whether or not we become God's likeness is left in our own hands. It is through growing in love, I'm suggesting, that we become more like God. I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, it's good.
I really, that's a wonderful observation. Maybe one of the best in the whole book. Because it's true. They're two separate words. All right? Demut is likeness. Tselem is image. Tselem can refer even to an idol or a statue of a king, much more concrete. But likeness, behavior, not just physical. Okay? And it means how you act. And if you want to become God-like, you've got to act, you've got to imitate God. That's where the imitation of God comes into play. Interesting. I like that. All right. Now, the next one I like also. God's our vulnerable partner. Okay? The bottom thing on page 2. The God we worship is a power-sharing God. God restrains God's self and refrains from using all of God's power. God delegates to us, appointing us as vice-regents, charging us with tilling and tending the earth, and God bids us to establish justice on earth. To put this differently, God has chosen to need us. God wants partners in love and partners in world building. God wants us to reciprocate God's love. God wants us to be the means whereby God's love for others is concretely expressed. As we saw in chapter 8, God loves the stranger in part by commanding us to love the stranger. We serve as God's hands by means of which God accomplishes God's ends. Yet God grants us genuine freedom, right? We're persons, not puppets, okay? So, in the final paragraph, God who loves and grants us freedom unavoidably is a vulnerable God. To love us is to take the risk of being hurt and disappointed. Like any parent, God takes risks, and there's no guarantees for how our children will turn out.
Yeah, isn't that the truth?
All right? No, I mean, it's a very interesting observation. If we are the children, Papa gets angry at us. So, I mean, a parent is faced with that dilemma, isn't the parent? I mean, even a parent who tries to be an appropriate parent, right? It's a challenge. And in a sense, this is a good analogy. That's a good thing to think about, my feeling. Okay, Bert. I'm not on mute. You see,
I've heard it.
You got to remind me to record.
Okay.
I got to remind you to unmute.
Guilty as charged.
Guilty.
Rabbi Yitz Greenberg has this theory / opinion that God was, in biblical times, was very, very involved in the world, very, very involved with what happened, and that over a period of time, God has kind of pulled back, kind of like a tzimtzum, and ultimately, in our age, turned the world over to human beings. Not against God, but that human beings are more of a partnership in God than they were at a point where God was intervening in life, as in Torah.
Well, I can challenge that. How long has God been doing that? Since when?
You mean pulling back?
Part of the word.
Yeah, pulling back. Okay. Because I can tell you,
I don't recall. I'm sorry. I'm probably not expressing his ideas very well.
Well, it's okay. No, I understand. I get a sense.
I apologize to him.
No. I could argue the Bible itself has that concept, and then it ends in an unfortunate way. The Bible has that concept. You think about it, okay? Deuteronomy warns the people. No, I'm sorry. Forget about Deuteronomy. Exodus already warns the people and says, if there will be repercussions if you don't follow the word of God. Leviticus already says that even in its earlier forms. Okay, the second temple was built under the auspices of King Solomon around, give or take, 930 BCE. It wasn't destroyed until 586 BCE. That's centuries. All along the way, God is yelling at the Jews, don't do that, don't do that. I'm going to get you, don't do it. Phase 1, 722, the northern kingdom is built. Okay? They had an opportunity to learn from that. King Menashe comes in and rules for 50 years and sacrifices children down the hill from the temple. Okay? Finally, following the concepts of the prophets, right? The temple was destroyed. Forget about realpolitik. But from a theological perspective, if you're living in Jerusalem, where the original temple was built, right? You are saying, my goodness, he has waited. You want to talk about a patient God, right? He stepped back. He let things play out. He said, if you guys get schmeiced by another king, no, it's because I'm not intervening, right? He says, I'll intervene for you if you deserve it, but if not, you will get a sense of what I'm talking about. Amos the prophet basically says that. He's warned you had an earthquake, he says. 2 years ago, you had a devastating earthquake. Who was telling you something? Right? That's Prophet Amos, 750. We know about the earthquake. There's evidence of that. There's a huge earthquake in the area there. Okay? All right. So I could argue the concept of God pulling back has existed. And then take the Second Temple. Second Temple was rebuilt 515 BCE. It stood in its various, and then really glorifiedly built by King Herod around the change of the millennia, right? All that period of time, right? You got people yelling about in different ways now, right? Because it's different groups of people. But you got plenty of people talking, this is how you should live, this is how you should live. And they're reading the Bible now regularly, more and more regularly. Prayer, formulas are popping up, and all kinds of things are going on. And you have corrupt priesthood, and you have a corrupt kingship, right? And you got people saying this isn't good, and so forth. I mean, the great prophets are no longer there. Daniel lived around the time of the Maccabees already. You still have one more prophet there, right? But I mean, the stories about him go back to Babylonia. But I mean, that was written. And all kinds of Musar is being taught. I mean, there was plenty of discussion about how you should live. And eventually the second temple was destroyed, not because of paganism, but because of internal problems. So don't tell me God doesn't step back. I mean, theoretically, if you want to argue the case, God stepped back for 600 years there and saw how things are going to play out. So, I mean, that happens. All right. So the question now is, I mean, coming out of the Holocaust, you can say, okay, God stepped back and let things play out. But the point is, again, I'll ask the question that everybody asks. Were the Jewish people who suffered quantitatively, percentage-wise, more than anybody else? We lost 1/3 of our people in the Holocaust. Okay? I mean, there may have been other smaller groups that did. I don't know all the different subgroups like the gypsies and all these other people who were killed. Okay, so I can't. But I mean, for us as a group, that was huge. And we're the chosen people. So God stepped back so that we could die that much. And the point is, nobody's now saying, I mean, there were some crazy people, in the Haredi world saying, well, this is all because of we did this and such and such. But by today, nobody, I don't know. I don't know what's going on in the minds of some of those extremists among the Jewish people. But generally, we know why. We haven't answered that. So, I mean, I have a problem with that. God steps back. I think I don't understand the mind of God. I can't explain to you finally how God operates. And I would say anybody who really believes that they honestly have the truth on that is not being totally honest. I mean, most of the people I know will hedge and say, this is how I feel about it. These are my sensitivities about it. They won't say absolute. This is the absolute truth. Okay. I mean, so when you make a statement it's Greenberg you're talking about?
Yeah, I believe his point was more that, that there was a time when God was interfering is the wrong word, was very, very active in what happened to human beings. Yes. And that over a period of time, God has kind of pulled back, and it's human beings that God is permitting to control more than back in biblical times when we have these stories of God controlling everything. I think that was his point.
That sounds more like Harold Kushner to me.
What?
You sure you're not confusing him with Harold Kushner? Because that's what Kushner says.
No. But I unfortunately, I started a conversation and am not able to speak authoritatively and would not want to represent or misrepresent Rabbi Greenberg's ideas.
It does sound just like Harold Kushner.
Well, does Kushner say God stepped back or God?
Yes, exactly.
I think.
Wait, Bobby. When did God step back, according to Kushner?
I'm not sure he puts the date, but that's his explanation of how God could be all good and all loving.
Yeah, but I think he said God stepped back after he created the world.
Oh yes.
All right. Oh, yes.
Sure.
Yeah. So God's never been involved.
Oh, that's not what Greenberg.
I thought Kushner says God.
No, you're right, Bobby. You're right. That's what he says. That's not what we're talking about. What I know what Greenberg's orientation on this is. Yeah, I mean the people, but you can't pinpoint at a time in history between the world was. When was the world created? 5,000. Where are we? 57, 84.
84, 85.
No, we'll be 84. High holidays. 83. All right. The world wasn't created 5,783 years ago. Okay. If you believe that, that's great. God bless. But, okay, the universe 14 billion years ago, whatever they say. I don't know what it is. Okay. All right. So God didn't step back at all. Okay, God's involvement, however you want to understand it, was consistent. Time intervals may change. But remember that now, based upon what this book tells us, God stepped back from the get-go and intervened minimally throughout history, because human activity ultimately determined the fate of human beings. God laid out, according to the Torah, God laid out a very clear statement of how things should be in order for the status quo ante continues to be in a wonderful way, right? God told Adam, don't eat from the tree. And what happened? They ate from the tree. Why didn't Adam tell his wife, stop, you're not supposed to do that? Didn't I tell you? No, you never told me. You forgot. Okay, stop. Okay, or he should have said to her after she ate it, she said, I'm not going to eat it. We'll get God to forgive you because I think I may have forgotten to tell you. Or I told you and you forgot. Or, yeah, you told me, but to heck with it, I wanted the apple. I don't know. What was her attitude on that? Nobody knows. Okay.
She blamed the snake. She blamed the snake.
Yes, exactly. And, but
he blamed her.
The snake's opinion meant more to her than her husband's. Remember, because God didn't tell it to her directly. And the snake seemed to be remember, snakes were believed to have divine powers. That's what that's all about. I mean, that's a myth based upon the mythology of that time.
Rabbi, I just want to ask one thing, because I'm the daughter of a Holocaust survivor.
Yeah.
My father was in the camps between 1939. I have the documentation, his liberation papers for the commandant from Dachau. He was 60 plus months. When I grew up, I thought it was more like a year, 60 plus months. You name it. He was in Auschwitz. He was in the ghettos, Sobibor, and he also did slave labor, in a factory, all that. And unfortunately, his first family, his wife, little girls, were killed. His sister, I'm named after his sister. Some of the brothers made it here, but pretty bad. But is there anything in the Torah, please tell me this, that where God advises Jews, because there are so many guidelines, be prepared? Because when I think of the Holocaust, it didn't happen overnight. I've studied the 1800s. I mean, there were many anti-Semitic, Richard Wagner, the composer, wrote all kinds of things. And I just wonder, and with Israel, and I love Israel, but again, be prepared. You have be prepared. And I'm asking you, did God ever say to the Jews, ever, anywhere, you better watch out and be ready? Because when I see the Jews walking off to the cattle cars and all that, my hunch is they did not know what awaited them. They just didn't. They wouldn't have walked so easily. More would have been partisans, and more would have had a gun. Or even, if there were 10 Jews and 15 Nazis, and the Nazis had the machine gun, I think the Jews would have tried to do something. And that they walked along. I mean, they thought by being quiet, that will happen to them. So what I'm asking you, is there any guideline, or just should we learn just by experience? Is that what God's telling us? Learn your history, get with it, and be prepared. What's your thought on that?
Well, I think from the perspective of the Bible, by and large, there are a couple of things. There is a rule in the Torah which is more addressed to an individual than it is to a people, which says if somebody is running after you with a sword, if somebody is clearly, without a shadow of doubt, threatening your life, and you have the capacity to kill them in first, you may do so, because you're saving your life. Okay? All right. But it's clear that it's not just any old type of a thing. It's not where somebody's saying nasty words at you, or even throwing rocks at you. But if somebody's actually coming at you with a gun or a knife, and you can kill them, you can do so. All right. So the question is, was that ever applied communally? All right. It's difficult to answer, because the question is, were Jews ever in a situation where they could do this? Now, you could make the case that when David, for example, was making conquests, and we're not even sure how historically accurate those stories are, okay? But let's assume that there were periods. Look, let's take another perspective. I mentioned the prophet Amos, okay? when he was the prophet, he was from the south. He prophesied in Beit El in the northern kingdom, in kingdom of Israel. He's from Judah. Now he's talking in Israel, in the northern kingdom. All right. The king at that time is Jeroboam II. Under his rule, they conquered lands, areas that prior to that were associated with David, on the other side of the Jordan. The extension of the northern kingdom under King Jeroboam II. In 750, the boundaries had grown. It looked like a wonderful, great moment, right? So he, you could say, was doing that, getting rid of enemies, conquering the enemies to provide protection for the people. And you could argue that's a legitimate thing to do because these are enemies like the Edomites, these and other guys, Ammonites, who had been pain in the necks or even conquering parts of Eretz Yisrael during the previous centuries. We know that happened in the 9th century. It happened. The boundaries are moving back and forth all the time. So if you could claim territory, make it strong, you are basically providing protection. For Amos, that's irrelevant because his whole point was the society that you've created within was a corrupt society. Basically, you've expanded your boundaries. It's meaningless because if you are going to allow people to cause pain and abuse within and to be an unjust society, you cannot justify the value of your having extended your boundaries. And he says to them, you had an earthquake down over here 2 years ago. That earthquake destroyed all kinds of things that you had built. That was God warning you that the extended boundaries were not the issue. In other words, basically, if you have the capacity to defend yourself against an obvious evil, you may do so, right? But the problem was, in these situations, were the Jews equipped to do that? I mean, forget about all kinds, you got to look at what was their concept. Let's take the Jews in Hungary, right? The last major group to be shipped off to Auschwitz, right? We're talking 1944, okay? 300,000 of them are sent off to Auschwitz. Goodbye. Basically, overnight. They came in not looking emaciated from living in ghettos, right? Living in poverty. They came in looking good, healthy out of those cattle cars, right? Complete change of situation. Okay, now you could say, didn't they sense already that there were changes taking place in Hungary that were an indication of anti-Semitism? They say, yeah, of course. But they never, in their minds, never imagined that it would end up like this. So at a certain level, what can you say? All right? I mean, and the same thing, Hitler was a smart guy. Remember, in Germany itself, it was stages. Slowly, right? Okay? I mean, so you're dealing here with minds who are beyond what your mind could have ever conceived of there being such evil. So the point is, they could have, had they had a, and there were revolts in some of the camps. We know about that. That's a piece of the history of the death camps that is not fully understood or developed. Yes? There were instances where they tried, and what happened to them? And what happened to the people who were left behind after they were killed? More of them were killed, right? Because they didn't care. They would line people up in the morning and just shoot them if they didn't want them. So, I mean, you're dealing with a whole approach to horror that was unimaginable.
By the way, Rabbi, to my dad's credit, so just to add to the piece of the story, he did try to get out before. He sent a photo of himself and his little daughters to his sister. Yes. He wanted a sponsor. And guess what? This is a story that's not told much. He couldn't get a sponsor to pay the $300 to get him. The United States didn't let you in free. You needed a sponsor. And he couldn't get anyone, because even the Jews here thought, no, not just what you're saying. They couldn't fathom it, so he couldn't get over.
In those early stages, nobody knew fully what he was under, what he meant. And we know that into the early 40s, even as he begun, when reports came over, it was dismissed because it was beyond their capacity. Okay, so I mean, it's hard, so where is God in all of this? Okay, and that's the question. I mean, these guys outsmarted God, if you want to make that point. Or you simply say, in the broader perspective, based upon, what Bobby said a moment ago, that from the get-go, God was not a God he didn't micromanage the world in which we live. That was our job, right? And you can say the Bible supports that. Be fruitful and multiply and rule. The whole point was you got to rule according to the rule, right? And you should know, he's basically saying, when you fail to rule according to the rule, there are going to be consequences. That was a fact of history. And you can say one thing, if you read the whole Bible, biblical history and post-biblical history would say the same thing. And Josephus tries to make that point in his definition of a description of how the temple was destroyed. And basically what he says, the Jewish people were not responsible for that war. The Jewish people are a noble, peace-loving people. It was the crazies. It was the zealots, these groups who fomented trouble, who caused problems. It was a corrupt government, Roman governor, right? These were internal factors that ultimately led to the destruction. It's interesting. I see your hand, Bobby. When I was teaching at the University of Judaism, I had a student who thought of Josephus. He was an Israel, a brilliant woman from Israel, a brilliant woman. You mentioned Josephus, she would say, traitor. He was a traitor. He was a traitor because he gave in. He became a Roman. He was a traitor. I said, I want you for your final paper to read his book on the Jewish war, and you tell me if he was a traitor or if he was an advocate for the Jewish people. And I remember when she finished reading it for the first time, we started talking about how she was going to write. She walks into the door, my office, and she says, he wasn't such a traitor, because they realized that he was, really defending the Jewish people. All right. But he points to the corruption that existed there. I mean, so was he a prophet? In some sense, he may have viewed himself as a prophet. I don't know. There's a debate on that. But the point is, things were going on, but to a certain, nobody could project out what the consequence would be. That's part of the problem. And again, that's why they had to come up with the notion, the rabbis did, the reason why it came down, because we committed a horrible sin. We hated each other. And God couldn't tolerate that. That defiled everything, right? And in a sense, Josephus says the same thing, not with the same answer, by the way, because Josephus says the people are not to blame. The rabbis said it was too broad. Everybody is to blame. It's a collective thing, so God came down upon us. Not too satisfying. No. Bobby, we got to start. Oh, my God, it's 10 minutes to 2. What's the last session? Let's go on till 5 o'clock. Go on.
Well, I was just going to say, I've learned a lot from Timothy Snyder recently, the historian at Yale. And, the crematoria were a last-minute decision as an alternative, because Hitler's plan was strictly deportation.
Yes,
there were two sites of deportation, Siberia and Madagascar.
Yeah.
Because Hitler really could believe that he would conquer the Russians, and then he would easily be able to deport people to Siberia, where they would die of starvation. Yeah. Or once he defeated the French, he could take over Madagascar, but didn't realize that he wouldn't be able to defeat the British, who controlled the seas with their navy. Yeah. So in January of 42, when Wannsee came, the idea of crematoria was a brand new idea. Yeah. It was only made because deportation was no longer an option to those deportations.
Oh, I would say one correction. they were beginning already. The blueprints for the crematoria were in existence even before that. They found them, and they were found. Yes, and
they had already done experimentation on gassing the children with ill children.
But they found preliminary outlines, because remember, that meeting was supposed to have actually taken place on December 9th.
Yeah.
And they canceled it because of Hitler declared war on America that day. So, I mean, the leading up to that was the implementation of that. But already preliminary plans for the crematoria, because, I mean, basically you're right. Because once he took over Eastern Europe and he owned that Jewish population, and this is already 39 that the process began, right? And he realized, this is a huge, what are we going to do? Right. And then, of course, when he realized ultimately that his plans, and this was probably going on between, I don't know when the process that he talks about started, but it must have been evolving over the course of a year and a half, even before, a year and a half. It didn't happen all at once.
But there was certainly mass murder with Einsatzgruppen and
of course, but they were efficient. Yes, but they weren't catching up with the problem. That was the point.
Right.
The problem was running ahead of them. And that's why the conference, basically, all it was a planning meeting to dole out responsibilities so that it was more controlled, and they probably knew where best to send them to do the funding so that it would work. Yes, so then they began to build the crematoria and develop the death camps, which previously were concentration camps. Remember, Auschwitz was originally a barracks for soldiers. Then it became for political, primarily political prisoners after the start of, once Hitler took over. And then eventually but they never made Auschwitz into a death camp. Birkenau, which is a kilometer away, a whole brand new camp, which was created in the 42, that was the ultimate answer. And you're right, it was based on all these new concepts of mass killing. And that was a machine, right? And it was very efficient. And that's one of the byproducts of the Wannsee Conference. Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, I think he's right. I don't know all the details, but I mean, I've done some reading of that also. Yeah, absolutely. Sure. All right, Barbara, and then I think it's time to wrap up.
Yeah, just to tell Jackie that, like when my grandparents came here from Russia, came to New York, they had to provide a sponsor and money then. I don't know when the money part and the sponsor, how far back it dated, but it wasn't just in the 40s. This goes back into the 1800s. Mm-hmm. That's all I wanted to say.
Right. But you got to keep in mind that after the mid-1920s, the doors were closed.
Right.
The doors were closed. And that was the problem.
I'm not sure that my great grandfather that came here in the late 60s, 1860s, had to provide a sponsor. But I know at least in the early 1900s, for sure, money and sponsorship was necessary.
Okay, well that fine, but it may have been, I don't know what they were charging for that. I don't know.
Well, my great grandfather came in with about $200, which is in our day now would be a lot more than $200.
Yeah.
Immigration was wide open until 24.
No, not really. That was on
21, I think, Bobby.
It was actually on the boat, on the manifest of the boat. They couldn't get onto the boat without money and a sponsor in 04.
Yeah, well, it's very possible. But it depends upon those were the doors, I believe, that were basically closed. And you needed I know there were families that I know of after Kristallnacht who were able to arrange exit from Germany. This is 1938, okay? And they began that process, and they began to, in other words, at that point in time, obviously, they had connections in the United States that allowed that to happen. From the German side, you could still get out. Remember the Kindertransport?
Right.
Yeah. You could get out as long as you had somebody on the other end. The problem was you needed to know somebody who knew somebody in order, after the 1920s, to be able to make that happen. And if you didn't know somebody who knew somebody, or if there was a somebody but they refused for whatever reason, that they had no control over. So it had to operate on both ends. So I guess so it made the policy of having to have a sponsor, sure, but it depends upon when and who and how. And look, my grandparents came over in 1904, 05. I mean, I don't know how much money they had, but he came over, as a tailor. All right. So I don't think anybody was concerned that a guy's coming over to become a tailor, So, I mean, there were no stories in the family of any difficulty. I had never heard anything, though, if they needed, my folks never told me, my grandparents never told me. You told me something just now, which is interesting, which you never know. It may be that they had relatives here. I think they did have some relatives here from the Rembaums who enabled them to fulfill those obligations of a small fee and paperwork. Because I know when they got here, there were, that must have been it. Because there were a family in the Boston area. That's why they went to Boston, because they had family there. Yeah. I'm getting in touch with some of those people, trying to figure out when they came over to see, I just within the last 2 months, somebody contacted me. Are you a Rembaum? Yes. Well, we're such and suches, but we came from the Marcuses and these guys, and you're all part of the family. Yeah, I remember the Marcus name, sure. Okay, so now we have a little circle. So that's something I'll look into to see if anybody knows if some of these guys who came over in the early 1900s, what they had to do to get in. It
was actually on the ship's manifest.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay, that's good. Well, we've seen that. My Freddie, her brother found the ship's manifest from when her mother came in the early 20s, before the gates were closed. That was right before the gates were closed, so she could come in. All right, finally, 2 people, and then we will stop. Denise, we haven't heard from you. How are you? Good to see you. Or hear.
Hi. Hi. I lost my thought. Oh, so just reading other books have nothing to do with Judaism. Edward Rutherford writes about New York and things like that. And to come into this country, even in the 1800s, when the Italians came and the Irish came and stuff, they had to have sponsors and money, but they had to have skills or like physical capabilities, and they had to pass a health exam. And even on the boat, if somebody was healthy when they got on and not when they got off, or they had to go back.
Interesting. Thank you. That's good to know. Very good. Okay. All right. So last night we ended. I drank a L'chaim, had some very good whiskey, and I enjoyed it. And unfortunately, could not physically share it with anybody. It's a problem when if we were meeting together, I would have brought the bottle and put it on the table. But the only thing was, it's very strong. I like strong whiskey.
Could we just read the last one with Ruth? I thought that was a really good ending for the book.
Oh, okay. All right. Fine. It's interesting. All right. I agree. I will do that. Let me just say, though, before we do that, because we'll end on a discussion of that. This has been, I said the same thing last night. This whole process for me as a teacher has been an amazing educational experience, not only because of the book, but primarily because of you guys. You're bright people. You ask great questions. You have good information, and you're not afraid to share it. Everybody in the class has participated actively, and I love it. I love it. I love it better than just people sitting there. I don't like that. So I just want to thank you. I really, really want to thank you.
And we thank you.
Well, I appreciate that.
I'll hook a vote to you.
Thank you. I wasn't looking for that. I know. I'm very appreciative. All right, so let's look at that last paragraph, okay? But my question is it feasible? You notice what I said. The book of Ruth is all about love and kindness, and tempted as we may sometimes to forget it, so too is Torah as a whole. The beginning and the end of Torah is loving kindness. And an 11th century sage explains this scroll, Ruth, was all chesed, which is loving kindness. The Torah was loving kindness, and it was given on Shavuot. In other words, it's not just a coincidence that the book that celebrates the holiday, the book of Ruth, is read the same time where we celebrate the Torah, right? Because they're both based on chesed, all right? And so we are reminded through a powerful example about the kind of Torah intends for us to live lives animated by love, manifested in concrete acts of kindness and generosity. And I think that is indeed a wonderful conclusion. That's the ideal, right? That would be the ideal.
Yeah.
Please God that the Jewish people are able to live up to this concept, and maybe even more so, please God that the rest of humankind can somehow absorb it and live up to it as well. Because what we're doing now ain't working. All right. Love one another. Love.
Yasher Koach, and thank you.
Yes, Yasher Koach. There's Koach in love. There is strength in love. Amen. All right.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
Great.
We look forward to your next classes.
My classes will start up again after the holidays.
Cool.
Did you
Which
tell us how you-
holidays? They're never stop, Rabbi. You don't have to answer.
Yes, they do. There's none in November.
That's not true. Jewish book months.
Rabbi, did you tell us how you chose this book or how this book came about to decide?
Wait, stop. My phone is ringing. Hold on. No, all right. Sorry, repeat. Thank you.
Did you tell us how you chose this book as the subject of the class?
Yes, I can briefly do that. We subscribe to the Jewish Book Review, the review of Jewish books. It's it's like a
The
big.
synagogue does, or you and Freddie do?
Huh?
You as a family, or the synagogue does?
No. We as a family, we subscribe to it. It comes out every other month, and it's really got wonderful. It's a serious book.
Yeah.
Writers. I mean, Anyway, so there was an article about the book, and I read it through. The guy had some misgivings, but I found it to be just in principle, the way he described it as something very worthwhile. So I bought it online. I don't have a hard copy of it. I only have the electronic copy. And I began to read through different parts of it and saw his style and saw his approach. And I said, this is terrific. Not knowing in advance fully how all the arguments would be developed. But I looked at the wealth of information that he was bringing and the wide range of sources. And I said, just as an encyclopedic discussion of the topic, this is whether I agree with them or not. This is amazing.
Were you familiar with Rabbi Held before?
I've heard the name. I've heard him associated with Hadar, but not really. I haven't followed his career at all. No. I didn't even know he was a conservative. He was ordained at Jewish Theological Seminary. Didn't know that. Yeah. But now that I read the book, I can see, where that would fit in. Yeah. No, but that's the reason why. And I said, one time I said, I got to teach this. I want to read it, but the best way to read it and to really systematically go through it is to teach it. So I said, I'll have a bunch of guinea pigs. No, excuse me. Guinea sheep. Not guinea pigs. Oy, they. No.
Well, guinea pigs are not pigs.
A guinea pig is not a pig.
I know.
Okay. Just clarifying that.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Guinea Basar Laban.
Thank you all.
Guinea Basar Laban.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And
Bye-bye.
have a great
Good night. I think we were lucky. We had a really good group of people that, like you said, made good comments and stuff like that.
No, it was great. It was a great group.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.